Step into the super crowd, where dreams take flight. Learn to invest like a pro, make your future bright. Impact investing, changing the game. Crowdfund the world, it'll never be the same. SuperCrowdHour, come join the ride. Change the world with us, we're on your side. SuperCrowdHour, come join the ride. Change the world with us, we're on your side.
Welcome to the Super Crowd Hour. I am so excited to have you here today. I'm excited about this topic. I know numbers and financial stuff don't sound exciting, but if you want to raise money, even if this is a foreign language, you've got to start learning a little bit about the numbers. So that's our topic today. It's going to be very helpful to anyone who's interested in raising capital from the crowd under regulation crowdfunding. This is really basic and essential stuff. So stick around. You don't want to miss a minute of what we'll cover today. You're going to learn how to prepare your financial statements for a crowdfund offering. We're going to walk you through all the details so that you can do this. And there are, for many of you, strategies for doing this all by yourself. So stick around. You don't want to miss this. We'll also give you some guidance on what to expect this to cost, because sometimes it isn't free or cheap. So stick around. You need this information. This is just vital. I want to thank Chandon. Chandon's here in the studio with me. He's our producer. I'm so grateful for the work that he does in supporting us in so many ways. I want to note that we talk about money in the Super Crowd Hour, but this is not financial advice. I am not your financial advisor. I encourage you to get a good financial advisor. In fact, we'll talk a lot today about getting an accountant to help you with these numbers. That's a good idea. I want to encourage you to join the Super Crowd. If you are not yet signed up to get our newsletter, I encourage you to visit Superpowers for Good, or just scan this QR code and we'll get you an opportunity to come. You'll get our newsletter every day. It's a great tool. And if you prefer to only get a weekly update, we can do that too. That's an option. So you've got all the options. We want to have you as part of our community. Join the Super Crowd today. Now, if you have questions at any point today, even if you are watching this as a replay, I want you to feel free to submit questions. Just scan this QR code on the screen or visit 4sc.fund/question. 4sc.fund/question. And we will answer your questions at this link. They'll come in via email, and we'll be happy to answer them. Today, we're going to be talking about Chapter 6 from Crowdfunding Made Simple. This is my book. It's a step-by-step guide to raising capital using AI tools. I invite you to download a free copy at 4sc.fund/CMS free, or just scan the QR code. We'd love to have you have this as a handy reference while we're talking about the book today. Whether or not you are interested in raising capital, I've also written a book for those who are interested in investing, and all of us can, even those of us who would like to raise more capital from the crowd, can also invest. And I encourage you to do that. And I've written a book to help you how to make money with impact crowdfunding. Scan the QR code here or visit 4sc.fund/ebook free. I want to thank our sponsors. We couldn't do this work without them. So let me just quickly share a brief message from our sponsors because it's just so essential to our work. I know none of you are paying for the privilege of watching this today. It's our sponsors that make that possible.
Welcome to Cineblock, a film investing. Welcome to Cineblock, a film investing platform for the movie lovers, risk takers, and enterprising filmmakers. With a click of a button, anyone can now bankroll the hottest up-and-coming films or shows as a real movie producer through investing at cineblockfilms.com.
We're grateful for the support we've received from Move the Needle with Rob Kaplan and Ridgecrest Herbals, a certified B Corp. We appreciate our co-hosts.
Prepare to be inspired by Devin Thorpe, a powerhouse in impact journalism and social good advocacy. This best-selling author hosts the acclaimed Superpowers for Good TV show featuring global changemakers like Bill Gates. With a readership of over 2 million, his 500-plus Forbes articles have shaped the dialogue on purpose-driven leadership and crowdfunding innovation. A sought-after speaker from the United Nations to Johnson & Johnson, Devin's unique blend of expertise as a former CFO and investment banker fuels his captivating presentations. Please welcome the dynamic and visionary Devin Thorpe, here to empower us all to harness our superpowers for good.
All righty, let's get into this. We're talking about the numbers today. And when we talk about the numbers, I'm talking about the financial statements, the numbers that represent your business. And there's a lot to unpack here. And the first thing to understand is that under regulation crowdfunding, when you seek to raise capital from the crowd, you are required by law to disclose financial information to your prospective investors. You can raise capital for 18 months following the most recent public financial statements. 16 months. 16 months. So if you are sharing financial statements for 2025, you can raise capital on those financial statements until the end of April of 2027. So it's kind of sticky. You don't need them to be super current in order to raise capital. If you're starting your capital raise late in the year, and you use prior year numbers, that may shorten your window. But especially right now, this time of year, if you do a year-end financial statement, it has some real, has some good life to it. But let's be clear that sharing numbers is absolutely required to raise any amount of capital under regulation crowdfunding. So let's walk through a few of these things. The financial statements matter because they represent the business, right? It's sort of the language of business. Whether you are talking about General Motors, NVIDIA, or your small business or startup, the numbers become, in a way, a common language. NVIDIA and General Motors and your business may not have much in common, but all of those businesses can have financial statements and should have financial statements that represent the operating performance of the business. That's why it's so important. It becomes a way of communicating the status, the condition of your business and, to some extent, its prospects. Under regulation crowdfunding, there are 3 tiers of requirements. For very small offerings, if you're raising up to $124,000, and hundreds and hundreds of people raise this kind of money every year under regulation crowdfunding, you don't have to have anyone else involved. You simply have to certify that your financial statements are GAAP compliant. Now, some attorneys will argue that if you don't have the expertise to certify yourself, the financial statements yourself, if you don't know what generally accepted accounting principles are, you can't meaningfully make that certification. So you may want to hire an accountant to do that, but that would still be a fairly inexpensive exercise. The next tier, from 124,000 to 1.235 million, requires reviewed financial statements. That sounds a little bit informal. Whenever I hear the label or the name review, it sounds informal. Like you just hand the financial statements to someone, they glance at them, they call it reviewed and hand it right back and charge you a small fee. The reality is, although an audit firm will describe the exercise as being much lighter than an audit, for those who endure a review, they will feel like it feels rather audit-like. It is a fairly formal process. There are professional standards that define what is in a review, and it's substantial. Not as substantial as an audit, but it's substantial. If you're going to raise over 1.235 million, you need a full audit. We'll talk about what all of these are, what they mean, how they differ, and what to expect in terms of cost as we go through the discussion today. First off, let's talk about the certified GAAP financial statements. So if you know what generally accepted accounting principles are, and in general, it's an oversimplification, but in general, when we talk about generally accepted accounting principles, we're talking about using an accrual method of accounting. So you would put on your financial statements things like accrued payables. You would record an invoice when you receive it as being an obligation. You would record a receivable, that is, that someone owes you money when you issue an invoice, rather than waiting for the cash event, right? When you might pay that invoice you've received 30 or even more days later. And so if you record the transaction when you pay the cash, that's called a cash method accounting. And that's typically what is used for purposes of paying your taxes. So a lot of small businesses operate using that method of only using cash as the indicator. So they record revenue and cash flow when the cash comes in rather than when an invoice is sent. They record an expense when they pay the cash out, not when the invoice is received. With an accrual-based accounting system, you'll record the invoices when you issue them, so you have a sale, not when you get the cash, but when you issue the invoice. You have an expense when you receive the invoice, not when you pay the invoice. So that's kind of the big distinction between GAAP financials and cash accounting, which is more common in small businesses. Typically, a startup that plans to be huge will start using generally accepted accounting principles out of the chute, because in the long term, that's what will be expected. But small businesses often operate on a cash basis because the only accounting they do is for tax purposes. So you need to figure out how to get from your cash books, if you use it that way, if you're keeping your books that way, to accrual for purposes of this rule. Now, I'm a member as a tangent. Let me just, tangentially say, I'm a member of the Crowdfunding Professional Association board. And at the Crowdfunding Professional Association, we are working to change some of these rules. We're hoping to raise the limit on the offerings that are subject to the review from 124,000 to maybe up to 350,000 or even $500,000. So that would substantially reduce costs. We'll talk more about what a review is in a minute. We're also advocating for the requirement to adjust to allow people to present their tax returns as their financial statements. It's a standard that is readily understood. It provides the same kind of disclosure. It's meaningful and fair. And so we think that that would be sufficient for the smallest offerings. So we're hoping to make this easier for you, but that's the future. Today, the rules are clear. You have to have GAAP financials. So that can be a frustrating hurdle for a small business that doesn't keep its books using generally accepted accounting principles. So I'm sorry for that reality. Most portals are happy to accept your certification that you've made that switch from cash to GAAP financial statements. But you may wish instead to pay an accountant hundreds of dollars, typically, to help you restate so that the financial statements are presented completely and fairly in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. So hundreds of dollars is what you would expect. If your business is old and substantial, it could be more than hundreds of dollars. It might be up to a few $1,000s. That would be a pretty unusual circumstance, but that could happen. So for reviewed financial statements, here we're talking about a cost of, it could, in the rarest cases, fall under $1,000. I've heard people say that, and that is probably true if your business is a startup and you're raising your very first capital from the crowd. So if you are literally talking about a business that has 0 transactions, 12 transactions, right? You formed an entity, you put in $100 of your own money, you have the bank account, you paid a filing fee to set up an LLC in the state where you live, there's $24 left in the bank account. If that's kind of the situation, you might even get your review done for under $1,000. But generally, you're going to expect to pay a few $1,000s for a review if you have some operating history. And if your business is substantial or complicated, it could be many thousands of dollars. I like to think of it as generally being about half the price of an audit. Some firms will do it a little less than that, in part because they view it as a way to build a relationship with you. They hope to be your audit firm as you grow your business and may need audits, may need tax returns in the future. So that initial review may be an entree to a relationship. So some firms will discount that a little bit. And let me point out, there are several firms now that have developed a national practice around supporting crowdfund offerings. These are the firms you want to use. If you call your neighbor who is a CPA and ask him to do this work, he probably can, but I suspect he'll charge more because the folks that have specialized in doing this for crowdfunders have figured out some processes to do compliant work more effectively and a little quicker. So I'd encourage you to reach out to me if you want to find the name of one of these firms that specialize in crowdfund offering accounting. Now, the audited financial statements. This is really kind of the gold standard. The audit standards are similar, but not quite exactly the same. But the audit standards are pretty similar, whether you're talking about NVIDIA or Microsoft or Goldman Sachs or your small business. If you need an audit, the standards are pretty much the same. Now, if you're a big public company, there are some slightly higher standards, but the fundamental steps remain the same. And so it's a comprehensive examination, no messing around. I've heard a few firms talk about being able to do an audit on that kind of empty shell business that just started, that has a few transactions in it, very inexpensively, under $5,000. But if your business is real and has any history at all, I'd expect to pay at least $5,000 for an audit, and it goes up from there. It quickly can get to tens of thousands of dollars as your business scales and its period of time in operation extends. So be aware of this. Also, as we start talking about all these fees for your auditors, generally speaking, they're going to require you to pay those funds up front. Some portion, perhaps even before the work begins, perhaps, but certainly no later than when they deliver the audit product or the financial statements, the certified financial statements, or the review. They're going to expect payment at that point. And you need these documents in order to do the crowdfund offering. So let's be really clear. You cannot effectively use the proceeds of the offering to pay for these services. So you need money to do this before you raise money. So it's a little bit of a catch-22, especially when we start talking about thousands of dollars for an audit. I have seen now a few cases where companies have successfully started out with the certified financial statements that they prepared themselves and paused an offering after raising some capital to do a review, amended their offering documents to incorporate the review, and raised more money after raising a substantial amount. Then they pause the offering again, do the audit, publish the audited results using the proceeds from the early raise, and then they are able to raise up to $5 million using the audited financial statements. So there is a sort of a clever way to do this on the cheap, but it probably raises the total cost to potentially do financial statements 3 times. But it does allow, under that strategy, for you to use the offering proceeds to pay for that work. Now, as I've kind of alluded, you've got to plan for this. It won't just happen, right? These are real costs. And I, as an entrepreneur, I run a small business. That's what my media empire is, a small business. And I get the pain of the costs of spending money on things like this. So I understand the pain. You've got to plan for it, organize your affairs so that you can do it, and then you can make this work. I want to come back to this thing, the topic of choosing the right firm. There is no question that a CPA firm in your community that does audits can do this work. Some CPA firms only do tax stuff. They specialize in that. But certainly many, if not most, also do audits. And they'll have one partner that does audit work and one that does tax work. And they build a firm around that. And firms vary in size and capabilities, but any firm that does audits is certainly legally qualified to do the work that we're talking about. So if you have an auditor friend, you could certainly ask them to do this. But the first thing I would do is very quickly is get to an estimate of the cost, or if you can, a firm quote based on the condition of your financial statements, the work. And in order to get that, you probably need to provide some sort of financial statements. And so if your financial statements are in a shoebox of receipts and bank statements, kind of raw, and there are a few people that are watching this that may be in that boat, probably going to cost more than if you can say, here's my Quicken account or my Wave accounting or FreshBooks accounting login, or let me print out my financial statements off of that and show you what we're doing. So as you have those conversations, you want to get a proposal from your friend, the CPA. That's reasonable. But I would also encourage you to reach out to me, and I can give you the names of some of the firms that specialize in this work and their contact information. And you can choose to get another quote from one of these firms that is probably across the country from where you are, but has developed the expertise that you need, and to see if they might be able to do it for less because they have developed processes for doing fully compliant work efficiently. And there are some that seem to have done that. So I would encourage you, again, to reach out to me to get that information. And it's easy to reach out to me when you are, as you watch today, you'll see come up on the screen the questions and answers link, the QR code and the short link. You can use that to ask me for that contact information. I'll be happy to share it with you privately afterward. I want to also flag that this accounting stuff, especially if you need a review, and it's doubly especially if you need an audit for your offering, this work takes weeks. And so if you wake up one morning and you say to yourself, wow, I'm ready to do a crowdfund offering. I'm excited. I want to do that. I talked to a friend who's an entrepreneur who raised $500,000 or $1 million or $5 million from the crowd, and I want to do it too. Great. One of the things to be aware of is what I call it the long pole in the tent. There is a lot that you can speed up by working hard. Stay up all night, use AI. You can do all kinds of things faster. There's a lot of this work preparing for an offering that can be measured reasonably in hours rather than days. It might take you 100 hours to prepare all of the material for a crowdfund offering, apart from the audit or the review. Well, if it's only going to take 100 hours, you can imagine that 100 hours could be spread over 100 days, an hour a day, or it could be crammed into a week if you set everything else aside and devote 100 hours this week to getting your offering ready because you are excited to get it done. Here's the problem. Your audit partner has processes to complete, people to manage, jobs to coordinate. They've got a queue. The reality is, if you need an audit, it could easily take 30 days. It could potentially take longer than that if the audit is substantial. I've certainly seen audits take 6 to 8 weeks. That's not an unusual period of time for an audit. Big companies, when I was the treasurer of a public company, a global public company, the audits took months. So you've got to be aware that that time period probably cannot be compressed. So if you've decided that you want to raise $5 million and you need an audit, the first thing you should be working on is getting that audit queued up and in process. Because you may discover, and we'll talk more about this, that you need to spend plenty of hours getting ready for the audit. You may not, if you're in the shoebox and bank statements mode, you may need to spend some time before you can be audited. The auditors can't do the accounting for you and then audit themselves. You have to do the accounting, hire a bookkeeper to help you put it together, and then you can hire the auditor to audit the accounting. You cannot have the auditor do the accounting because then they're auditing themselves. I really want to highlight this essential fact, right? That doing this right, doing this well, whether you're talking about certified financial statements, reviewed financial statements, or doing an audit, a full audit, this is really essential to communicating to your audience that you trust them with information, that you are trustworthy. This is an essential part of the communication you'll have with your community. So I encourage you to take this seriously and recognize the strategic value in good financial statements becoming part of your offering story. One of the things that always happens in the process of a review or an audit is that there are discrepancies that are discovered, right? It can be something simple, right? You buy routinely, let's just say that you routinely buy from one particular vendor a certain class of materials that you always use in some way. So maybe it's you always buy your office supplies from them. And then you buy something unusual from them. Maybe it's a big purchase like a computer. It's possible that in the initial take on the bookkeeping, that the computer was treated as a big order of office supplies and was expensed. And the audit might turn up that computer purchase should have been capitalized and depreciated. That's more work, and I can see why you'd want to avoid that. It may also have implications for taxes, deferring some of the tax benefit of an expense. But that doesn't change the rules. Maybe that computer needed to be capitalized and depreciated for tax and GAAP purposes over a period of time. Those are the kinds of things that come up with an audit. And so if they discover that you've done something they question, I want to encourage you to not fight, don't argue. When you do that, it becomes in and of itself a red flag for the auditors. And at some point, if you push back too much, and I've seen it happen, right? If you push back too much, the audit firm may quit on you in the middle and say, we're not willing to issue an opinion on these financial statements because they are materially incorrect. Wow. You don't want that to happen because you're not going to get all your money back, right? They're going to expect you to pay them for the work they've done, and then you'll have to pay another firm to do it again. And you could end up in the same problem, the same place. So I encourage you to accept as the general rule, with rare exceptions, the pushback you get on the auditors when the auditors say, we found something that looks to us like a mistake. The general rule is to accept that, make the changes they're recommending to your books, and proceed. If they have to make too many changes, if they have to recommend too many changes to your books, we get back to the situation where they begin to feel like the audit is of themselves. They're doing too much work on the accounting instead of auditing. So that's one of the reasons why you want to make sure that you and your bookkeepers have prepared the accounting as well as possible so that you can have the audit done successfully. I encourage you to be open and honest with the auditors. You want to be reasonably transparent. Don't try to hide things from them. You may be trying to hide a $25 thing here or there. They get that. They're not going to be too wound up about that, but they'll get anxious if they perceive that you are always hiding things. So I encourage you to be open and transparent. That's an essential part of building a healthy relationship with your audit firm. Now, the reality is I talked about the fact that the Crowdfunding Professional Association, where I serve on the board, I've recently served as the president and co-chair, and I currently serve as the treasurer, very actively involved, serve on the policy committee. We're advocating for changes to make these rules a little easier for more people so that more people can more easily raise more money. We want to see people raising more money more easily. So I encourage you to stay informed. I encourage you to keep your ear to the ground. Join the Super Crowd. We'll be sharing this news. Visit s4g.biz. Just that, s4g.biz, and you can join the Super Crowd for free. Just sign up for our newsletter. If you want to go crazy, spend $5.95 a month to become an impact member of the Super Crowd and get free access to some of our special events, as well as other perks. So I encourage you to do that. You've got to stay tuned in to what's going on in the regulations so that you are doing it right. And that's one of the reasons why I would encourage you to be sure to get a quote for this kind of work from one of these audit firms that specializes in regulation crowdfunding. Because your local firms, like I live in a town where I can find no record. It drives me a little nuts because I love crowdfunding so much. I can find no record that anyone in this town has ever raised capital from the crowd under regulation crowdfunding. So there isn't a local audit firm that has ever done this work. And it's likely that if you were to call up an audit firm in your town, that they've never done, even though they can certainly do it, they've never done an audit for an issuer doing a crowdfunding offering. So relying on one of these specialized firms can speed up the process and save you money and ensure that they are dialed in, because they're doing this all the time, to these adapting and changing regulations so that you are getting the right standard done at the right time. Now, I want you to also be thinking about the future as you do this work. And whether you are have just completed a round and are thinking about doing more, one of the keys, right, is to maintain good records. And if you are thinking about doing a crowdfunding offering in 6 months and 12 months and sometime in the future, I encourage you to step up your game on record keeping and accounting. Make sure that you're doing things like reconciling the checking accounts every month so that you're keeping your numbers current. It's so much easier to figure out what the transactions were when they happened 2 weeks ago and the receipt is still sitting on your desk than if you're trying to figure out what on earth happened 13 months ago. I've been there myself. I encourage you to be really deliberate about maintaining your accounting records in good shape as you go so that they don't become a burden or a barrier to capital raising in the future. You can also use your numbers to demonstrate growth. I know we're proud of the fact that our revenue at the SuperCrowd is growing. We're thrilled by that. We're thrilled that our audience is growing. You know, we just got our data for January for our views on our television show, and our television show audience, Superpowers for Good, airs twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 Pacific. Hope you'll tune in. But that show, the audience has grown almost tenfold in under 3 years. Tenfold. We're so excited. But numbers help to tell that story, right? And so I encourage you to be maintaining your books and records. It'll help you manage your business better and prepare for storytelling, for audits, for reviews. It's going to help you in every way in running your business if you are gathering and collecting that data and keeping your records well. I want to help you anticipate the unanticipated, the unexpected. You've got to be able to roll with this. Frequently, because we do our live pitch events where we have people wanting to participate, people that have done our live pitch events have raised a lot of money from the event directly. In fact, the top performing capital raise under regulation crowdfunding, according to King's Crowd last year, was a company that won one of our live pitch events. It's pretty exciting. It really matters to savvy entrepreneurs and savvy investors to be a part of this. So I often have people tell me that they want to apply for the live pitch, but then don't have their offering live yet. And they promise me we'll have it live before the live pitch. even though it's after the application deadline. Let us apply. And I've been adamant that we don't do that. And here's the simple reason why. And I've seen it happen over and over and over again. It often takes longer than people think. Even the people at the portals, the people with the experience, expect it to take one period of time, and it takes more time. So I encourage you to really try to anticipate those unexpected. Now, Andrew has submitted a question. Andrew said, what financial mistakes do founders make most often in offering documents? Mistakes, that's an interesting thing. It's a little bit subjective, right? But I think the biggest mistake that people are making is incomplete disclosure. The SEC rules and the law requires you to provide your financial statements in the offering documents. And so, when I did my offering, I included the income statement, the balance sheet, the full one that I used to manage my business. Now, it was simple. I did a small offering, no audit, no review. I'm a financial guy. I certified myself. Great. It was free to do that. But I often see in the offering documents incomplete financial statements. And when I see incomplete financial statements, it worries me that the business may not be keeping good records. And I think that's a reasonable fear on my part as an investor. So I think if you were to disclose more complete financial statements, even though it's more private information, that would enhance your relationship with your investor community and allow you to raise more money more quickly. And that relates, I think, to this topic that we're talking about, dealing with the unexpected. I want you to encourage you to get advice. And one of the things that we talk a lot about in my book is getting feedback from AI. Now, there's clearly growing evidence that AI will listen to you if you push back, right? So if you ask AI, what do I need to do here? And it tells you need to do X, Y, and Z. You need to get an audit and get it done properly. And if you explain to it why you don't want to do it, it'll agree with you don't need to do it. But that first answer was probably right. So, Brandon, I appreciate your question. How much financial detail is enough without investing? Overwhelming? That's subjective. I'm a finance guy and I'm an investor. I've invested in nearly 100 deals now. And I like all the financial data I can get. There's no limit to my appetite. And I know I'm not the only investor who thinks that way. Now, am I universal? No. If you're getting money from your friends, your customers, your family, they aren't finance guys. As a general rule, they're not going to be as concerned about it as I am. So can you raise money with abbreviated financial statements? I think you can probably get away with it. Would more complete financial statements help you raise more money more easily? I think so. And it might help you attract bigger, savvier investors who could put in not $1,000, but $10,000 or $25,000 into your offering. That's a nice little lump of cash in your offering. So I encourage you to be as transparent as you can, which relates to this topic that I wanted to, as we get close to wrapping up now, I wanted to bring this up, that what drives the financial statement process is the regulation. But what I want to emphasize to you is that this is really a key part of building relationships. It isn't just about complying with the rules and doing the least required to comply with the rules. Instead, I encourage you to think about how you can communicate effectively and completely and transparently to build a relationship with your potential investors that would encourage them to feel safe in giving you more money, right? So I encourage you to check that out and to be sure to be full and fair in your disclosures. I want to caveat something. I focus all my work around social impact, whether we're talking about environmental impact, improving global public health, whether we're talking about social justice, all of these issues. If you are an entrepreneur, a social entrepreneur, trying to make the world a better place, here's a reality check. You are establishing for yourselves, when you start talking about that, an expectation that you will be doing business in an open, fair, and transparent way. There is a genuine expectation that because you seek to do good in the world, that you will be good to your investors. You will be fair and honest. And so I want you to acknowledge, when you start talking about social impact, you may be able to convince investors to accept some of their return in the form of social impact. They may be willing to take more risk. They may be willing to invest more money because of your social impact. But they will also expect you to deliver with transparency the information that they want and need, not only to make an investment, but going forward. They will expect you to comply with your annual reporting requirements, et cetera, et cetera. We'll talk about the annual reporting requirements in a future session, but that's a key part of what you are required to do under regulation crowdfunding. Now, here's a quick checklist. Let me just walk through a few of these items with you, if I may. We talked about you've got to determine the tier, whether you need certified, reviewed, or audited financial statements. You've got to prepare a budget. You've got to have the money for this up front. You can't use the money you're going to raise to pay for these costs. That is one of the big challenges. You've got to get everything organized and ready. And if you're in shoebox mode, in bank statement mode for doing your financial statements, there's a long lead time before you're ready for presenting real financial statements, getting them reviewed and audited. You got to gear up for that. You've got to find the professionals. I had to get at least a couple of quotes, unless you're really happy with the first one. Plan a timeline. You want to get your offering launched as quickly as possible. I encourage you to plan ahead and take the time. I have heard that sometimes portals will rush you to do things more quickly than you'd like. I'd encourage you to stick to a reasonable timeline. Your timeline is probably, if someone's trying to accelerate your timeline as a third party, I would slow them down. Use your timeline. You know when you can be ready. You know when you can put your marketing plan together and the whole thing, and fit this accounting and bookkeeping and financial statement process into that total plan. But it isn't the only part of the plan. It's an essential, required part. It isn't the only part. You've got to address those discrepancies. There are going to be issues come up. If you have an auditor review, there is almost zero chance there won't be some discussion about mistakes, errors, discrepancies that you've got to correct in your financial statements. I encourage you to stay tuned in to the regs. Join the SuperCrowd so that we can alert you when there are changes. You want to maintain good records going forward. You've got to elevate your game so that you have good financial statements so that you're ready to raise next time. ChatGPT can really be helpful. I really encourage you to use ChatGPT. can help you with understanding the requirements. It can give you more details on the difference between a review and an audit. It can help you organize your records and prepare. It can help you even decide how to do an accounting, right? If you've been doing cash accounting and you're trying to convert to GAAP accounting, there's a lot of information you could get on that transition from ChatGPT. You can also get help with drafting emails that don't sound too defensive when you're communicating with your auditors when they have a discrepancy or problem, and otherwise kind of navigating challenges. There are all kinds of things. So I encourage you to use ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini to help you with these things. It can really make a difference. Here's some sample prompts. I think one of the great ones here is preparing for an audit, right? What are the things I need to do to prepare for an audit? That what a checklist of documents, that kind of stuff is really going to be helpful to you to get ready for an audit or a review. But ChatGPT can be really, really helpful, and all the AI stuff. Again, will it make mistakes? Absolutely. Just like humans that taught the AI bots how to, they will make mistakes, but it's pretty smart. It's pretty smart. So I encourage you to use it. This step of preparing financial statements for your capital raise really is foundational. It's genuinely important. It isn't just a tick box on the form. I encourage you to invest the time and energy into doing this well so that this can become a genuine tool for you in raising capital as you go forward. With that, I want to thank you for being here with us today. We've really enjoyed having you. And again, if you're watching this as a replay on YouTube, social media, or on our Substack newsletter, Superpowers for Good, great. You can still email me questions. I'm happy to respond, including if you would like to know who are some of the firms that specialize in this. I'm happy to share that information. With that, I want to thank you all for being here and wish you a well. We'll see you again next month for the Super Crowd Hour.